Part 217. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2165. Seeing that Man Bao was a little worried, Bai Shan couldn't help reaching out to hold her hand and looking at her comfortably. Man Bao looked down at the hands they held together, and after thinking for a long time, he couldn't think of anything to comfort him, so he could only sigh, "It's up to her." The car window was knocked on. Bai Shan turned his head to look, and saw Bai Erlang riding beside the carriage. He shouted, "Aren't you all endorsing? Why is it taking so long? We have to play the leaf card, and there are no people." After finishing speaking, he smiled to please Mr. Zhuang and greeted, "Sir, do you want to play the leaf card?" Mr. Zhuang glanced at him quietly and said, "You can memorize a fox fake tiger might tomorrow." Bai Erlang couldn't laugh anymore. Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at each other, smiled and said goodbye to Mr. Zhuang. When they got to the carriage, they were led by guards and went with the carriage. Man Bao got on the horse first, and then Bai Shan. The three horses ran to the side, and the two carriages behind them slowly left the team and stopped. Bai Shan asked, "Aren't the four of you just right?" Bai Erlang said, "If Li Ru doesn't play the leaf card, she won't play if we pay her." The carriage stopped. Lu Huan lifted the curtain and complained to them, "Man Bao, are you scaring the third niece, or why would she refuse to play the leaf card?" Zhou Liru pushed him away and jumped out of the car. "Who is your third niece? I'm my sister-in-law's third niece, not yours," she said. "You all bet money when you play leaf cards." "I don't play for money. And I didn't know how." "I can't learn," Lu Huan kept encouraging her, saying, "It's said that we give money, and we lose if we lose." "No," Zhou Liru glanced at him and said, "My grandfather said that when you start gambling, you can't stop unless you break your leg." Of course, her fourth uncle almost broke his leg before changing it. Lu Huan. Man Bao jumped off his horse and asked, "Are you going to gamble?" Lu Huan emphasized, "The purpose is not to gamble, but to play leaf cards." "Then why use the money?" Man Bao said, "Whoever loses will go to the horse." Bai Shan said, "Or go to the next city for dinner." Lu Huan was startled. Once, that was more expensive than gambling. Bai Shan thought about it and said, "The one who has lost the most." Man Bao encouraged them, "Push the duck." Everyone turned to look at her. "Aren't you coming?" Man Bao shook his head directly, "I won't come, I have no money." Crowd. "And the four of you are just right." Yin He said, "We don't mind adding one more person." "Is there a rule for this?" "The rules are all set by people," Bai Shan said, "it's just a game of cards." Man Bao still doesn't want to come, mainly because if she loses, what if she can't help but let Keek cheat for her? Zhou Liru took the opportunity to say, "Little aunt, please help me check the medical book I've memorized." Man Bao nodded immediately, "You guys fight first, I'll check Li Ru's homework." So they left the four and went to a carriage behind Zhou Liru hand in hand. Daji waited for the guards to put away their horses and lead them to watch them. In the end, the four decided to fight and climbed into the carriage. "Bai Shandao, let me split the cards." Lu Huan murmured, "Their aunts and nephews are really stingy." Bai Erlang was not surprised, but he was not happy when the senior sister said that, their family is not interested in gambling. "Small gambling, why is it so strict?" Yin Or asked, "Do you have a lot of money?" Bai Shan also looked at Lu Huan. Lu Huan shook his head, "Not much, but there is still money for a meal, and I don't necessarily lose." He often played leaf cards with his grandmother. Then Lu Huan kept losing until he lost 4 times in a row. He looked at Bai Shan, then at Yin Or, and shouted, "It's not fair, you two join forces." Bai Shan's expression remained unchanged. "We don't have a clear card, what's unfair? And have you seen us communicate and play a card?" Lu Huan turned his head to look at Bai Erlang, who shivered while holding the card. "Don't look at me, even with your alliance, I can't beat the two of them. Lu Huan pursed his lips, I'm not reconciled, come again. Man Bao heard Lu Huan's cry from behind, yawned and said, sure enough, gambling is not good. She decides to sleep. Zhou Liru also finished reciting the text, and helped Man Bao pull out the wooden couch. She lay down to sleep, and she sat by the door and took out the idle book to read. Running all the way, the group entered Liangzhou city. Bai Shan and the others didn't want to say a word. After entering Liangzhou city, they went straight to the inn, washed their hair and showered, and then they asked for hot soup. Liangzhou city is a big border city. Usually, there are not many officials and officials who live here. Even now, there are 2 officials living in their inn with their subordinates. However, Zhou Man and the others have the largest number of people. Rao's post station is not small, there are many people, and he is too busy for a while. After taking a shower, Man Bao came out with his still wet hair, kicked off his shoes and sat comfortably cross-legged on the bed, and said to Zhou Liru who went in to take a bath, I saw a lot of people from the western regions in the street just now, let's go shopping at night. Already. They had traveled a long time in the grasslands to reach Liangzhou. They didn't meet 2 of them along the way. When they met, there was no one inside. Even if they met some herdsmen, Man Bao and Zhou Liru felt very lonely. Therefore, when Man Bao proposed, Zhou Liru happily agreed. Bai Shan and the others also wanted to go out to play, so they cleaned up after washing up, and when they went downstairs to drink the hot soup they ordered, they planned to go out and have dinner outside by the way. The 6 teenagers went together to invite Mr. Zhuang. Mr. Zhuang also wanted to go out to play, so he dressed up and wanted to go out with them. The postmaster heard it and couldn't help but say, Sir, Liangzhou city has a curfew at night, you have to come back before dark, or you will be caught by the patrolling soldiers. It's not easy to escape even if you have your life in your body. This was said to Man Bao, because he knew that Zhou Man had the highest official position and was also the leader of the team. Man Bao was slightly surprised and asked, isn't there a night market in Liangzhou city? There are night markets in the cities she has been to. The postmaster smiled and said, except for certain festivals, there are no night markets in Liangzhou city. Mr. Zhuang also reacted and said to Man Bao, because Liangzhou is a border crossing, then we will come back after dinner and a little stroll. Man Bao could only agree. So a group of people went out lively. Man Bao said, I have to go to the pharmacy to buy some herbs. Bai Shan said, let's go tomorrow, it's getting late today, let's eat first. Man Bao had no opinion, and planned to see where there was a pharmacy on the way. As a result, she walked all the way and didn't see a single pharmacy. She couldn't help but look seriously. After Mr. Zhuang and the others found out that the delicious food had entered a restaurant, Man Bao returned to his senses. She said, there are a lot of iron shops here, all the way there are 4 down here. Bai Shan also noticed, because it's a border town. Good night. Although it's a spoiler, I can't help but quietly say yin or no official match. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2166. Liangzhou was different from the towns they had visited before, and it was also different from Xiaoshu. Its city walls are khaki yellow, and the houses in the city are mostly khaki yellow. People walking on the street are also very different from those in the central plains, mainly because their clothes are very rich in color. People walking in it are more prominent. But as long as you look at the texture of their clothes, you know that they are not ordinary fabrics, so the guys at the roadside restaurant are very warm to them. In the end, Bai Shan and the others chose a restaurant that looked relatively large and went in. They chose a window seat on the 2nd floor, but they didn't enter the box and sat directly in the lobby on the 2nd floor with a wide view. Bai Shan glanced down and noticed that most of the young men coming and going had swords in their hands, so he nodded and said, it should be, Go back and ask Wei Xingren to inquire about the situation. Mr. Zhuang looked at the following for a while and then said to Man Bao, although we are passing by and are not on business in Liangzhou, but since you are here, you might as well send a message to the governor of Liangzhou, and you can sit down and talk. He said, if I remember correctly, an inspector was recommended by the prince. Man Bao whispered, I'm not the prince's person. Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, it doesn't matter, people outside think you are. In their group, Man Bao is close to the prince, he is the prince's attendant, and the 4 Bai Shan are the prince's companions. If they say that their group is not the prince's people, others may not believe it. But Bai Shan said, I don't think it's urgent. Anyway, I have to stay for 2 days to rest. Why don't we go to the street tomorrow to buy some extra things, and then send the post later, in case someone comes to the door? Mr. Zhuang thought for a while and thought it made sense. After all, there were not only Man Bao, an imperial physician who won the emperor's heart, but also Yin or this county man. At this time, they are not powerless and powerless by Ding, maybe an inspector will really come to the door first. So Mr. Zhuang nodded. When Zhou Liru saw that they had finished speaking, he immediately said, then I'll ask the guy to order food. There is no menu, but the guy is very clever and can memorize all the menus. Several people listened to the menu and ordered several items, and then said, 2 more pots of white rice. The man was taken aback for a moment and then said, sorry, young ladies and gentlemen, today's white rice is sold out, but we have corn rice, as well as naan, biscuits, pancakes, big steamed buns. Anyway, there is no white rice. The few people who hadn't eaten for several days couldn't help looking downstairs at the lobby. It wasn't time to eat dinner yet, but they didn't eat much lunch, so they came early because they were hungry. There are not many people in the lobby downstairs at the moment, and there is only one table besides them on the second floor, and there is no white rice on their table. So, you can't sell it if you don't have to sell it. Why do you say it's sold out? Several people who wanted to eat sighed, and then Mr. Zhuang ordered 2 large steamed buns, Bai Shan chased it, and Man Bao ordered naan. The guy wrote it down one by one, but he couldn't help looking at them a few times. This was the first time he had encountered a staple food that was ordered separately for one person. Wouldn't it be better to just ask for a basket of steamed buns or a plate of pancakes? The guy turned around and went down to arrange the dishes. After a while, he brought a pot of boiling water and asked, do you want to drink alcohol? Bai Shan refused on behalf of everyone, and stopped Mr. Zhuang, who was hesitant to say anything. Man Bao and Mr. Zhuang said, the journey is exhausting, and it is not advisable to drink alcohol at this time. Well, the only person here who likes to drink can only compromise. After ordering the dishes, everyone couldn't help but look left and right, forward and back, and then their eyes fell on the people at the same table on the second floor. They were sitting behind them, Bai Shan was facing them, and Man Bao had to tilt his head. Seeing them looking behind them, Bai Erlang and Lu Huan turned their heads to look back, but Yin Or couldn't help turning half a body. Look! The 3 people who were drinking and drinking were aware of their gazes, and couldn't help but paused for a while. Then they all looked down at themselves. They checked themselves nervously and found nothing wrong, so they looked up hesitantly. Bai Shan and several others, what advice does AncientChina have? Hearing his question, Bai Shan immediately got up and greeted him happily. Bai Shan is from the capital. I don't know how the 3 brothers are called. The 3 of them looked at each other and signed their names with some trepidation, in Xiaoquashan. It's under Yuzheng. In Lower Quanrui. The 3 of them were all in their 20s, and the futu they wore was Ruan Luo, obviously they were also scholars. Bai Shanxian introduced himself, we are classmates. This time I came to Liangzhou for a study tour, so I don't know Liangzhou very well. The AncientChina people are natives of Liangzhou, so I took the liberty to come up to disturb them. Hearing that they came to study in the capital, Guo Tian couldn't help laughing friendly and said, "Brothers, you can ask us anything you don't understand. If we know, we will tell us." They are both scholars, so naturally it is better to make a few more friends, and depending on each other's clothes, their family will not be bad. Dare to come to Liangzhou for a study tour, and his family is not low. If you don't look at it from a distance, you can see it just by looking at the guards on the other side. Bai Shan warmly invited the three of them to come and sit together. They have a big table, and adding 3 people is just right. After hesitating for a while, the three stepped forward and greeted each other less. After hearing that Mr. Zhuang was their teacher, the three respectfully bowed to Mr. Zhuang before sitting down. Bai Shan sat next to them, and when he sat down, he winked at Man Bao. It would be better if they didn't, and they could understand a little bit before meeting Duan Shishi. Man Bao pursed his lips and smiled. Bai Erlang asked them enthusiastically, "Are you still studying?" The three nodded. Guo Tian said proudly, "We are all students of the school." Man Bao counted the time. Today is a holiday. The holidays for official schools across the country are the same, only the holidays are different. Bai Erlang sighed and said, "If I don't go to school, I'm about to forget even today is he 11. It's boring when I mainly cross the grassland, the sun rises and sunsets, and I don't feel much at the end of the day." Yu Zheng couldn't help but ask, "Where did you all go to school before?" Bai Erlang said quickly, "We go to school in Chongguen Hall, and the rest day is the same as you." The three of Guo Tian were startled, and couldn't help but ask, "Are you the prince's companion?" Everyone knows that the Chongguen Museum is affiliated to the East Palace. Bai Shan glanced at Erlang Bai and said with a smile, "It's not a companion reading, it's just reading in the Chongguen Museum. Now that I'm going on a study tour, has Brother Guo ever gone on a study tour? I don't know what fun places are in Liangzhou." Because the atmosphere of Bai Erlang's coldness revived, Guo Tian became more cautious. He said, "We have traveled to study, but the furthest we have been in Ziyazhu. We are Liangzhou. There are not many interesting places, but the Great Wall can be go." See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2167. There is a section of the Great Wall outside the city of Liangzhou, blocking between Liangzhou and Tubo. Actually earlier, the Tubo now belongs to the Central Plains, but this is the territory of the Turks, so the Great Wall is used to block people here go south. But whatever, anyway, it has a role now, that is, it stops Tubo from going north. Man Bao looked puzzled. Tubo just go west, why can't you think of going north? After a few people thought it was true, Bai Erlang said, "So now the Great Wall is blocking us." He said, "Tubo is cheap." The three Guo Tian. Bai Shan changed the subject, "Are there no soldiers guarding the Great Wall?" Guo Tian returned to his senses and smiled and said, "Yes, but not many, so ordinary people can climb the Great Wall and look into the distance. Students from our school often go there to play. In addition to grasslands and deserts, Liangzhou can also see the Great Wall." Bai Shan was also eager to try, and encouraged Mr. Zhuang, "Sir, let's go to the Great Wall and see how it is different from the one in Ziyazhu." Mr. Zhuang glanced at them, and when he saw that they were all looking at him with bright eyes, he nodded and said, "Okay, then go for a walk." Guo Tian and the two partners looked at each other, and they were a little moved. "When does Brother Bai want to go? Why don't we be the host and explain a little to everyone?" Bai Shan laughed, "That's the best." He thought for a moment, and then made a decisive decision, "The day after tomorrow will be better, we will rest for a day or two tomorrow." Mr. Zhuang's brows twitched, and the three of Guo and Tian responded with a smile. They decided to ask for leave when they went back. It's better to ask for a few more days. Let's hand over friends first. Bai Shan was very happy and welcomed them warmly. The three of Guotian knew that they were living in the inn, so they made an appointment to meet at the inn the morning after the day after. Everyone went downstairs together after eating and drinking, and then parted at the door of the restaurant. Man Bao and the others were not in a hurry to go back, so they planned to go back while shopping along the street. When it was time to eat dinner, the street was a little more lively than before. The shops on both sides of the road had everything, but the stalls on both sides were the most food. Along the way, there are all kinds of aromas, among which the cakes, barbecue and stew are the most. Ming Ming had just eaten dinner, but after walking for a while, Man Bao smelled the fragrance wafting from the side, and stared at the naan on the stall and couldn't move. Bai Shan took out a few pennies to buy one, put it in her hand and let her eat it. As soon as Zhou Liru saw it, he jumped up and grabbed the aunt's left hand. Bai Erlang also squeezed Bai Shan to eat. Mr. Zhuang looked at him and shook his head slightly. He took 2 quick steps first, and Bai Shan also took 2 quick steps to walk with Mr. Mr. Zhuang asked him, "Didn't you plan to meet Duan Inspector in the future?" Bai Shan smiled and said, "There's nothing wrong with a day's delay. Lu Huan rarely eats on the street like this, especially after having dinner, but when he saw the three of them eating with relish, he couldn't stop staring at the three of them. Is it delicious?" Bai Erlang nodded, grabbed a piece and gave it to Yin Or a piece. Yin Or was stunned, but after taking a look at Bai Erlang, he reached out and took it, but he couldn't help but look at Zhou Man. When Man Bao saw it, he nodded and said, "Eat it. If you have accumulated food, eat hawthorn pills. I have it on my body." Yin Or, he knew that he would eat, so he prepared Xiaoshi pills in advance. It was the first time for him to do such a thing. But, it doesn't feel too bad. Yin Or grabbed a small piece and tasted it. "Well, it is indeed delicious, not worse than the one I ate in the restaurant just now." Man Bao said, "It's crunchy and delicious. We can bring more when we leave Liangzhou, and we can also eat it as snacks on the road." "Is this a staple food?" Bai Erlang said. "How can you eat naan as a snack?" "Why not? When we were young, we used small steamed buns as snacks. Isn't the small steamed buns also a staple food?" A few people were gossiping, and they carefully strolled around the stalls on both sides of the road. Unfortunately, they only looked at it and didn't buy it. After all, they were traveling, and their luggage couldn't be stuffed with too many things. The vendors on both sides greeted them excitedly at first. After all, these young ladies are not from ordinary families, and they must be rich. As a result, they picked it up excitedly, looked at it, asked, and finally put down the things with a look of regret, then turned and left. The vendors who have already raised the price on their own initiative, if you think it's too expensive, it's not that they can't negotiate the price. When the group walked slowly back to the inn, it was almost dark outside, the streets that were still busy just now quickly cooled down, and the vendors started to pack their things and go home. Yuchen was still worried, and was planning to send someone to find them. When he came out, he saw them standing at the door looking forward, not knowing what they were looking at, so he stepped forward and followed the probe to take a look. There are only some street vendors who are collecting things and drinking and selling things. "What's so beautiful?" the postman asked. "Master Zhou, what are you looking at?" Man Bao shook his head and said, "I didn't watch anything. I followed them to watch. I just felt a little overwhelmed, so I stood to digest and digest." Bai Erlang said, "I followed Mr. to watch, and what Mr. sees I see." Lu Huan was already a little bored. He wanted to go in and go upstairs to go back to his room, but they stood at the door in unison. He couldn't go in by himself, so he followed. Zhou Liru said, "Sister-in-law, I just took a closer look. There is only one pharmacy on this street, and it was closed when we came back just now. Man Bao nodded, I saw it too, I'll check it out tomorrow. Mr. Zhuang glanced at Bai Erlang, then glanced at Lu Huan, his eyes fell on Yin Or. What is Yin Or looking at? Yin, he said embarrassedly, sir, I'm just watching the play. I rarely see the scene, and I feel it is very fireworks, so I can't help but stop and watch. Mr. Zhuang nodded with a smile, and then said to Bai Erlang, I'm watching life for my teacher. Bai Erlang lowered his head, oh, it's too advanced, and he can't study it for the time being. Postman. Bai Shan also retracted his gaze, turned his head to see the postmaster, and asked with a smile, is the store closed so early here? In just a short while, not only the vendors on both sides of the road were collecting things, but some shops were also collecting things. The postmaster smiled and said, yes, but it will be fine after a while. Several people were puzzled, and he explained, after a while, the sun will get longer, it will get dark later, and the curfew will naturally be late, so everyone can stay outside for a while longer. Bai Shan was very curious, isn't it safe in Liangzhou? Of course it's safe, but it's not necessarily outside, and the dark curfew has been a rule in Liangzhou for decades, and everyone is used to it. Liangzhou is a frontier fortress. It was robbed in the past, and all kinds of intrigues and tricks came out. Therefore, for the sake of safety, this rule has always been in place. Even now, there has been no war for several years, and Liangzhou has not changed. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2168. The group entered the station and went back to their own rooms to stay. They had not slept in bed during this period of time, so as soon as they lay down, Man Bao couldn't help sighing contentedly, rolled half-circle with the quilt, and then fell asleep. Go outside and let Zhou Liru sleep inside. Zhou Liru was also sleepy, yawned and climbed in, asking, little aunt, what herbs are we going to buy? Man Baidao, we have to make up for what is missing, and prepare some medicinal materials for the treatment of smallpox. We will see the situation along the way. Zhou Liru took it in his mind, then yawned and fell asleep. Most of the people in the inn slept, but other families in Liangzhou did not fall asleep so early. Inspector Duan Inspector's mansion has just returned to the mansion from outside. An aide followed him into the study and reported some things he didn't have time to deal with this afternoon. Finally, he remembered something and said, there is a letter from the inn today saying that an adult from the capital is going to the western regions, passing by our Liangzhou. Stop, maybe for a few days. Duan Inspector said, is it eating and drinking with public funds again? Are there many people with you? There are not many people who exceed it, so I will report it to him here, but tell the postman to prepare more staple food, vegetables, and meat for them. These are expensive, although I am willing to pay, but I can't let them spend a lot of money. My lord, I misunderstood, and the postmaster said that in addition to the quota, they will pay for those who come over. It's just that they leave the official's family and get a 20% discount, which is even cheaper than staying in an inn outside. Inspector Duan just raised his brows and didn't pay much attention to this matter. Anything else? Don't you ask who the boss is? Hearing this question from the staff, Inspector Duan asked, which general is that? Is it related to me? It's not the general, it's the Imperial Dr. Zhou of the Imperial Hospital. Inspector Duan didn't realize who this was for a while, and his staff lowered his voice and said, you forgot, she was compiled by Kong Wengan, and she is the only female official in the DPRK. Inspector Duan immediately reacted, it's her? What is she doing in the western regions? Shouldn't a big boss be sent to the western regions? Otherwise, should the group of people from Honglu Temple go? Why would a imperial physician go to the western regions? The staff nodded. I inquired about it, and the inn said that they seemed to be going to the western regions to find a way to prevent smallpox. Inspector Duan immediately sat up straight and asked solemnly, "Is there a way to prevent smallpox in the western regions?" "I don't know, but I heard what they said very solemnly, it should be true, not to mention that this is someone sent by His Majesty," he said. "In addition to this Imperial Dr. Zhou, there is also a Master Zhuang, who used to be the prince. Your Highness's attendant said that the 4 young masters accompanying him are all students of Chongquen Museum." Inspector Duan then understood what his aides were implying, and was startled, "All of His Highness's people?" The staff nodded and lowered his voice, "Not only that, my lord, there is another one named Bai Cheng." "What's his identity?" "Princess Mingda's future consort. Concubine." Inspector Duan's eyes flickered, and he said, "You write a post, send it tomorrow, and invite them to come to the banquet the day after, and I will hold a dust cleaning banquet for them. No, they won't stay here for long, but this official as the host, no matter what, you have to give up the friendship of the landlord." "Yes, I'll write it right away." Inspector Duan felt his beard and pondered, it seems that the western regions really have a recipe, otherwise, how could His Majesty and His Highness let them out? The prefect's office took this very seriously, so the staff personally went to the door with the post early the next morning to invite someone. As a result, everyone didn't wake up. Yuchen said to his staff with an embarrassed look, "The adults are tired, so they may wake up later. Do you want to go down and call them?" The staff stopped him, "No hurry, I'll just wait." Yuchen didn't dare to let him wait, so he went to make a pot of tea in person. It's just that today's Man Bao and others seem to be able to sleep very well. The staff drank 2 cups of tea and their room did not move, but Mr. Zhuang got up. After he groomed, he went downstairs, and before he turned to the second floor, he smiled brightly at the people who went upstairs and downstairs. Mr. Zhuang couldn't help but smiled at them. So, when Man Bao was full of sleep and stretched out to get up from the bed, Mr. Zhuang downstairs not only finished his breakfast accompanied by his staff, but the two also sat on chairs and chatted for half an hour. The sleep of the young people is almost the same. When Man Bao woke up, there was movement from other rooms. The postmaster breathed a sigh of relief. There were quite a few officials sent to his post, but this was the first time he saw a chief official like Zhou Man who could not afford to make a living. Man Bao went downstairs to meet the staff, and after receiving the post in his hand, he said embarrassedly, "But we have an appointment with a friend to visit the Great Wall tomorrow. If the adults don't mind, we will come to visit the day after tomorrow." The aide was a little dazed when he saw Zhou Man. He knew that Zhou Man was young. After all, she was too famous, and he knew that she was not very old, but he didn't expect her to be so young. The same words have different effects when spoken by different people. If Mr. Zhuang or a middle-aged official like him said this, his staff would have thought that he was looking down on Duan Inspector and Liang Zhou, so he was deliberately evading. But what a teenager of Zhou Man's age said, it seemed very sincere. After thinking for a while, the staff nodded and said, "Naturally, you can't let the adults lose their trust in others, and then I will wait in the governor's mansion in the future." After speaking, he smiled and said, "It turns out that the adults also have friends in Liangzhou. I don't know who they are. There are not many people in Liangzhou, maybe even the humble ones know each other." Man Bao didn't say that the friends they met only yesterday, smiled and said, "I don't know if you recognize them. One is called Guo Tian, the other is called Yu Zhang, and the other is called Quan Rui." The staff was startled, and then smiled, "It's also a coincidence, these 3 are all students from the school, and our son is friends." Man Bao also raised a smile, "What a coincidence." As soon as the staff left, Man Bao touched his chin and asked, "Is it really such a coincidence?" Bai Shan took a look at the post and said, "What's the matter? Liangzhou is not very big, and the school is not big. Isn't it normal to know each other? Didn't they do the same when they were studying at Yizhu Fuxiu?" Man Bao nodded and left the matter behind, but the staff ran home to say something like this, so the next day, Guo Tian and the others came to the station to pick them up. Guo Tian smiled and introduced the new youth to them. This is a classmate from our school, Duan Cheng. Bai Shan raised his eyes to look at him, and then asked with a smile, could it be that Duan Gong's father is the Inspector Duan? Duan Chen nodded, yes. Duan Cheng was still a little embarrassed to be pressed down by his father's ear. After all, they didn't know each other, and they didn't know what his father was thinking. If he wanted to have a relationship, there would be time tomorrow. Bai Shan didn't show any other expression, but nodded happily and said, Fate, Fate, we are going to visit the mansion tomorrow, but I didn't expect to see young Master Duan first today. Duan Cheng breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that he was not sarcastic. See you tomorrow. Guo Tian and the three uninvited guests. Duan Cheng, I am here to join you, not to destroy you. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2169. The Great Wall of Liangzhou is in the southwest direction outside the city. There is a very wide avenue in the past, and most tourists can go up there. Duan Cheng and the others often come here to play, so they are familiar with it, so they can directly take them to store their horses and carts, and then everyone will climb up. The Great Wall here is much steeper than the Great Wall in Ziyazhu, and some places even go up vertically, which is very dangerous. Man Bao and Bai Shan helped Mr. Zhuang to climb up, and it took half an hour to climb up. Everyone exhaled a sigh of relief and looked back. Yin He and Lu Huan, Bai Erlang, were still halfway there. When the two of them finally supported Yin, or one from the left and one from the right, Bai Shan and the others made the T. Man Bao glanced at Yin Or and saw that although he was panting, his face was fine, and he looked very happy, so she smiled and waved, come and drink tea. Lu Huan and Bai Erlang looked even more tired than Yin Or. They moved up step by step with the help of the city wall. They sat on the mat and said, it's too tired. Yin Or also came over, but instead of sitting down, he leaned against the city wall and looked at the cliffs below and the vast grasslands in the distance. Man Bao poured him a cup of tea, got up and brought it to him, also looked at the mountains and grasslands that stretched away, and said with a smile, do you think it's amazing? Yin Or looked over in confusion. Man Baodao, the great wall that has already been built, it is difficult for us to walk up, but the great wall that extends along the ridge is all built by people, and such a long great wall was built by people, brick and stone, I don't think it's magical. Yin Or nodded, it's amazing. He glanced at the steep rock wall again, and said after being silent for a while, they are very powerful. Bai Shan also stood by the city wall and looked at the Tibetans outside the Great Wall, and then looked back at their Liangzhou. He couldn't help but turn his head and ask Duan Cheng and the others, will the Tibetans attack Liangzhou from here? No, Duan Cheng said, at least in the past 20 years, Tubo has never attacked from here. The Great Wall is not all connected together, and there are some places in the middle that have not been built, so if there is a gap, they will send heavy troops to guard it. Although it is difficult for heavy troops to break through, it seems to be easier than the Great Wall. If you cross the Great Wall, you will basically be unable to get over the baggage and grain, and only people who come here will be of little use, not to mention that people are not so easy to live. Bai Shan, so it's hard for our troops from Liangzhou to enter Tibet from here. Duan Cheng was stunned for a moment, then nodded, yes. But what are their Liangzhou soldiers and horses going to Tubo for when they have nothing to do? Guo Tian couldn't help but look at Bai Shan, what does this one mean, do you want to accept Tubo? However, the Turks have all destroyed the country, and even the region as far away as Jiaokang has belonged to the Great Jin, and there is nothing wrong with taking back the Tubo. In fact, Bai Shan asked curiously to be sure of what he was thinking. It turned out that the Great Wall really not only stopped the enemy, but also stopped itself. Not to mention, although there are only bricks on the Great Wall, standing on it and looking at the ridges and grasslands on both sides, especially the grasslands on the Tubo side, is very happy and ambitious. Even Yin Or said, according to the city wall, I wish I could gallop on the battlefield and make achievements. Bai Shan pondered for a while and then said, don't talk about you, even me is a little difficult. Thinking about martial arts is also very good. I don't know if it's too late for me to work harder now. Mr. Zhuang said, for the generals, you see bravery, and for the handsome, you see wisdom. If you are not good at martial arts, you can make up for it with wisdom. He said, I still remember a few military books for the teacher, why don't I stay silent and show you? Bai Shan. Bai Erlang smiled gloatingly on the side, and Mr. Zhuang turned his head and said to him, you and Bai Shan learn together. Shirojiro. Lu Huan was happy. Mr. Zhuang's eyes swept over, he immediately lowered his head and shrank his neck, quietly hiding behind Yin Or, pretending that he did not exist. But Mr. Zhuang didn't let him go, and even Manbao had to follow him. Duan Cheng thought for a while, then took the opportunity to say, I also have a few military books at home. Young Master Bai wants to read them, so you can borrow them. Bai Shan never had too many things like books, whether he was interested or not, so he accepted the other party's kindness with a smile. Duan Cheng smiled slightly, and decided to find the book and have it delivered to him after he went back. The group stayed on the mountain until noon, and after walking around the area, they went down after they had enough rest. Going down the Great Wall is much easier than going up the Great Wall. Although it looks more dangerous, it is not tiring to walk, as long as your feet are firm enough. It was the first time that Yin He stood on such a steep place and was so confused that he didn't move. After seeing the generals of the Yin family, they did not dare to let young Master Lu and second young Master Bai support their young master indiscriminately. Bai Shan still supported Mr. Zhuang. Mr. Zhuang waved his hand and said, no need. He supported the city wall and went down, looking more vigorous than Yin Or. Bai Shan and Man Bao went down hand in hand. Lu Huan looked envious and emphasized with Bai Erlang, I'm going to say kiss too. Bai Erlang asked, how can you say kiss after you've come out? Anyway, it's a matchmaker's word for parents, so what does it matter if I'm here? Bai Erlang, you think so, what if your parents set you a bad-looking girl? He glanced at Man Bao and Bai Shan who were walking down together in front of him, and said, also, even if you are engaged, do you think the girl you are proposing can climb the Great Wall with you? Lu Huan also hesitated after thinking about the favorite activities of the ladies in Beijing. Zhou Liru walked down past them, I suggest you talk to a little girl from a Kung Fu general's family, so that she can not only accompany you to climb the Great Wall, but maybe even help you climb the Great Wall. Lu Huan subconsciously looked down at Erlang Bai's hand that was supporting him, pushed it away immediately, and insisted, I can climb by myself. But looking down at the stairs that were still very high, he felt a little weak in his legs. Strange, why didn't he find it so high when he climbed up in the morning? At that time, he and Bai Er were still supporting Yin Or. It looks so steep. If you accidentally roll down, you won't stop, right? He was trembling and could not move his legs. When Yin Ori saw it, he pointed to a family general and said, go and help young Master Lu. Home will pass. Everyone went down to the foot of the mountain tremblingly, caressing their chests and said, I finally know why there are no soldiers guarding this section. Guo Tian smiled and said, even those of us who often come to climb the Great Wall are also very frightened by this section. If the enemy wants to attack from here, I'm afraid it will not be easy. After all, he didn't know if it was because of Bai Shan's influence. He silently took a sentence in his heart. Of course, it would be difficult for them to attack the past. Everyone went back to the city together and had lunch together, and the relationship deepened a lot. See you at 7. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2170. When Duan Cheng got home, he went to his father first, and explained today's affairs in detail. Inspector Duan couldn't help but stroked his beard and asked suspiciously, "Could it be that your majesty intends to send troops to Tubo?" Duan Cheng said he didn't know. "Maybe it's really possible," Duan Inspector murmured while grabbing his beard, "your majesty was still in his prime. In fact, Dajin has been fighting one after another all these years, not counting the war before the emperor ascended the throne, that is, after he ascended the throne, the Central Plains area was settled down. The quartet, especially the north, the war has never stopped. In the first 5 years, the Turks provoked them. Later, His Majesty supported Shui Yanchuo and other ministries to turn against Xiongli Khan. After several years of operation, it was their turn to send troops to the Jin dynasty. Finally, the Turks were destroyed. Now only the remnants have gone to Kangju. In the inn, Bai Shan and the others were also talking about this. Bai Erlang saw that he was really looking through the box to find the military books, and then Man Bao really took out 2 military books and gave them to him, copied by hand. It was really hand-copied. It was a book they copied in Kuazijian before, and it was going to be handed down to the family because they didn't have it at home. It's still his handwriting, but it's been too long. At that time, it was just a copy, so now I only have a general impression, but I can't remember most of the contents. Bai Shan opened it and asked curiously, "Why are you still carrying these 2 books?" Man Bao coughed lightly and said uncomfortably, "Take it and read it as a storybook." Bai Erlang looked at her with horror, and asked, "When did you become like this?" "If you want, Bai Shan, just turn your head and look at it, and even take the book he copied with you." Man Bao glared at him and said, "You can stop talking." Lu Huan had a complicated look on his face. "You've already passed the Jinshi exam, why are you thinking about reading military books?" With his intelligence and connections, as long as he has passed the examinations of the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Personnel, he can soar to the sky, so why should he go to martial arts? Bai Shan flipped a page of the book and said, "Who said I'm going to join the martial arts? This is to be prepared. Maybe in the future, when I am a landlord, I need to fight. How is this possible? My country is strong, and I haven't fought a war for decades." Everyone turned to look at him in silence. Lu Huan's voice gradually softened and asked, "What, did I say something wrong?" Man Bao said, "If I remember correctly, didn't His Majesty just capture Jao Kang a few years ago? The Jao Kang royal family was even taken prisoner." Bai Shandao, "That was 3 years ago. Half a year ago, Goguryeo colluded with the Suemo clan to attack Yingzhou. If it weren't for the severe epidemic in Xiaozhou, His Majesty would have wanted to go on a personal expedition. Isn't this a battle?" Lu Huan, "Really? Why didn't I know?" Bai Erlang, "You are still in the capital, I don't know if I am in Xiaozhou." Lu Huan immediately said, "Bai Shan is also in Xiaozhou, how does he know?" Bai Shandao, "Didn't we go to Zhenshifu to help transcribe the documents that we had written for a while after we went back? There were documents from Yingzhou to prepare for the war. We copied several of the books at that time, have you forgotten?" Bai Erlang and Lu Huan, "Copy the document, just copy the document, and the word is correct. Why do you need to memorize the content? After copying it, they have to send it to various departments, and then go to memorize the content. Do they have to think about it?" Yin Yu asked, "Do you want to be employed in a major northern town in the future? Otherwise, the war has nothing to do with him, right? Although the quartet has been in constant wars, these years are actually small wars, which have little to do with the Central Plains, not to mention conscription, and even taxes have not increased. So the Central Plains is the real peace for the past 20 years. Bai Shan said, it's still early, it depends on how the Ministry of Personnel arranges it. So you want to go out? Yin He looked at Man Bao and asked, what about Man Bao? She can't go out of Beijing, right? Should the husband and wife be separated? Man Bao waved his hand indifferently and said, we'll talk about it later, it's a big deal. Bai Shan, who was about to speak. Yin He and Bai Erlang Lu Huan looked at Bai Shan with sympathy. Bai Shan changed the subject and said to them, actually, our country is not as stable as we feel. Don't you feel it during this time? Bai Shan used to really think that their great Jin was peaceful and prosperous, and that war or something was too far away from them. After arriving in the capital, only after getting in touch with them did they realize that there were always wars happening outside the Central Plains. Not to mention the small frictions that are not reported at the border, but there are also many wars that will be reported to the capital. But those were just words. He had feelings, but he couldn't feel the aura of war. Until the grassland. He looked at Yin Or, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but slightly raised, and he lowered his voice and said, aren't General Nikan and your family members looking for the situation on the grassland? Yin He's eyes widened, when did it happen? Seeing that he didn't seem to know, Bai Shan said, that should be Lord Yin's order, you should continue to ignore it. He said, this piece of land was the territory of the Han people during the Han dynasty, but after the melee between the north and the south, this piece of land was occupied by the Hu people for nearly 60 years. During this period, I don't know how many owners have changed, and now it is back in the hands of our Dajin. But there are not many people who have a sense of belonging among them. You can see from the map department that they are only sons of officials, and the other party is very wary of them. If they know that they are officials, they don't know how to doubt them. He said, the grievances between the Turks and us are not clear. When His Majesty ascended the throne and Xiongli Khan approached the capital, His Majesty made a lot of concessions and signed a covenant with him. Treasure, do you think Your Majesty hates it? Although the historical materials of this section are still being compiled, Man Bao was compiled by the Chongquen Museum. When he went to the Hanlin Academy to find books, he had read the notes compiled by the historians. A historian wrote it down in a small notebook. The emperor was humiliated by this, and he kept it in mind. Therefore, Khan Xiongli only left a few months ago, and he took advantage of the snow disaster on the grassland to help Shui Yanchuo and others rebel. Xiongli Khan. Shui Yanchuo and others fought with Xiongli Khan for 5 years, which could not be separated from the emperor's secret support. The historian also wrote down the emperor's name in small print, thinking that he held a grudge. Bai Shandao, later, His Majesty sent Li Shangshu to send troops to the Turks to take back this large territory, and the Turkic kingdom was destroyed, but not everyone surrendered, and some people fled to Kangju. On the way, you killed me, I killed you, and only 3 Khans were replaced. After Kangju settled down, His Majesty generously rewarded them. However, the Turks were strong, and once they were able to force the Central Plains to shrink south. Do you think they will be willing to shrink in Kangju? Lu Huan raised his hand and asked, where is Kangjukuo? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2171. I know, Man Bao also raised his hand. In a place further north of Jiaokang State, I heard that the reason why Jiaokang State was destroyed was because of the instigation of the Turks not to pay tribute on time, and to collude with them to rebel, or privately or publicly humiliated me, Dajin, and His Majesty sent someone to destroy Jiaokang. However, the Turks fought more fiercely and were farther away, so the emperor picked up the persimmons and squeezed them softly. Thinking about it this way, their emperor does not seem to be so upright. So the outside world is not as stable as we think. Bai Shan shook the book in his hand and said, be prepared, Dajin is so big, and now only the Central Plains and Jiangnan are stable. I may not be able to go to those places to take a job, so I still need to prepare more. Some are good. Bai Erlang thought of himself. He didn't really want to add more homework to himself, so he asked, "Can I just read what Mr. wrote?" That's what Mr. asked, and he couldn't refuse. Bai Shan gave him a strange look. "I didn't force you." "Then you can't read these extra books in front of Mr., or Mr. will definitely think of me when he sees it." Man Bao said, "And me, I've been very busy recently, and I don't want to increase my schoolwork." Bai Shan knew that she was reading an idle book recently. If it wasn't for the shaking of the carriage, it would not be appropriate to read for too long. She would have liked to sit in the car and read for 6 hours a day. He glanced at the two of them and said, "Your demands are too high." Man Bao rolled his eyes and said, "I will wrap the book for you." Bai Erlang's eyes lit up. "This is a good idea. Man Bao and I will do it. The thickness of this book, how about I make the book cover of Zhou for you?" Without waiting for Bai Shan to refuse, Man Bao and Bai Erlang diligently went to make a cover for him. Bai Erlang's book box has a blue blank cover, which he obtained through his relationship with the bookstore owner. The reason why he can cover so many idle books with covers that gentlemen can't see is because of this. He took out one and gave it to Man Bao, and Man Bao carefully folded it, then grabbed the book in Bai Shan's hand to measure it, and after folding it, he began to grind ink and add words on the blanks of the cover. This task is naturally handed over to Man Bao. Bai Erlang grinds ink for her. Bai Shan sat aside and watched, seeing Man Bao holding a pen in the blank space, as if he was composing a picture. He stepped forward and grabbed the brush and said, "I'll come." Man Bao immediately gave him the position. Yin He and Lu Huan saw the whole process of Bai Shan forging the cover, and it was really written in one stroke. He blew the ink and showed it to them after drying. Even Yin He couldn't help but say, "It really looks like it." "Of course," Bai Erlang said proudly, "he wrote more than half of the covers of the miscellaneous books we read since childhood. The remaining half was forged by him and Man Bao. The main thing is that they don't want people to know about it quietly, and the books that can be known to their friends are basically forged covers by Bai Shan." Yin Or and Lu Huan looked up at Bai Shan, with an expression like, "I didn't expect you to be like this, Bai Shan." Bai Shan handed the cover to Bai Erlang, asked him to pack it, took the pen and said, "I'm actually good at writing." Everyone, haha. Anyway, since the school bags are packed anyway, Mr. Zhuang really didn't pay attention to what book Bai Shan was reading, mainly because they didn't have much time to read books at the moment. They went out for dinner again in the evening. Liangzhou City is not big, so they visited Liangzhou City in a day and a half. Ready to leave, and began to carry things in large and small bags to the inn. Even the governor Duan in the governor's mansion knew that they had bought a lot of things. When the two sides met the next day, Governor Duan laughed and asked Zhou Man, "Master Zhou, what do you like about our Liangzhou City? Come back to me. Let someone prepare some souvenirs for you." Man Bao smiled and said, "The naan in Liangzhou City is delicious." Inspector Duan hesitated, not sure if she was serious or just joking. Man Bao is already reminiscing, "I heard that some people also use milk, sugar, and sesame to make it, which is more delicious." Duan Inspector was certain that she was serious. He thought about it for a while and said, "It's not difficult. My cook will do it. Lord Zhou likes it. I'll have someone send some to the inn." He smiled again and asked, "Where do you want to stay next time, Lord Zhou?" Man Bao smiled and said, "It may pass through the territory of Suzhou, and I am hesitating whether to turn the corner and go to Suzhou City, or go straight ahead and only stop in the county under its jurisdiction." Duan Inspector helped them propose a journey. He was the inspector of Liangzhou and knew more about the road conditions in this area. Man Bao listened carefully. They also brought Wei Xinggren and others with them. Naturally, they had to ask Nai Kenjun, Wei Xinggren, and others about the itinerary. On this matter, Everyone talked very much, and in the end, Manbao and the others really changed the itinerary, mainly because they heard that the road they had originally chosen had more horse thieves recently. After a meal, the relationship between the two parties heated up sharply, and Duan Inspector took the opportunity to invite Zhou Man to see his mother. He was actually a little apprehensive when he proposed. After all, it seemed that his status was not enough to invite a fifth-grade imperial doctor to see a doctor for his family. He was afraid that Zhou Man would care. In fact, his mother is not seriously ill, but the weather in Liangzhou is too cold, and the bones are a little cold. Manbao didn't think much about it, and answered happily, and then took Zhou Liru to see Mrs. Duan. Inspector Duan breathed a sigh of relief, and the smile on his face became 2 points more cordial. Bai Shan and Mr. Zhuang, however, saw Duan Inspector's careful thinking, the corners of their mouths twitched, and they took a sip of tea. Yin Or looked at the two masters and apprentices who were moving in a uniform manner on the opposite side, and lowered his eyes to look at the tea at hand. Inspector Duan turned his head happily to talk to Yin Or. I may have not seen Lord Yin for a long time, but I didn't expect this nephew to be so big in the blink of an eye. Inspector Duan once worked under Yin Li for a period of time, and he was considered to have a connection. Yin Or smiled at him. Inspector Duan really sighed. He never thought that Yin Or was still alive, let alone that he could travel far to Liangzhou, and even to Jiaokang. If he didn't believe anything about it 8 years ago, I'm afraid other people won't believe it. How many times has Yin He prepared coffins since he was a child? Inspector Duan did not leave a single one behind. After communicating with Bai Erlang about the prince's current situation, he finally looked at Bai Shan and Mr. Zhuang. For these two, he did not reminisce about the old times, and he was more solemn. He knew that the status of these two in this team was the same as that of Zhou Man, the chief official. So the three talked about some situations along the road, especially the situation in Liangzhou. Bai Shan then mentioned the doubts that he had been pressing in his heart. Along the way, I see that the stations along the way are very separated, some stations are already dilapidated, and some stations seem to be able to live in people, but the door is locked, and there is no people run it, so I'm curious what's going on. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2172. Inspector Duan did not expect Bai Shan to ask about this. He sighed, but did not hide it, because the inspector's mansion has limited money. I let them demolish all the stations along the way. In fact, I didn't dismantle it, I just closed it up, because dismantling also requires money, so I can save some money when I need to open it later. In the case of other officials, Inspector Duan would definitely be a little bit embarrassed, but facing Zhou Man and the others, Inspector Duan would be very shameless. As a result, one of them is close to the emperor. Crying poor can let the emperor know that Liangzhou is very poor and needs support urgently. Second, everyone is the prince's person, and the rounding is his own. Since he is his own, if there is a problem, he will naturally let his own people know. So Duan Inspector was very attentive and cried with Bai Shan and Mr. Zhuang, and even Bai Erlang Yin or others who were on the side were stunned. Liangzhou is very poor, manifested in various aspects. There was originally a fertile paddy field under the jurisdiction of Liangzhou, which was not very large, but the yamen could still receive a certain amount of tax from it every year, and the people could barely be self-sufficient. However, there has been little rain in Liangzhou in the past 2 years. The paddy field is by the lake. There are 2 lakes, not very far apart. There are rivers and ditches that divert water from the lake to the paddy fields. The farmland was originally located at a certain distance from the lake, in order to prevent soil and water from entering the lake, and the lake shrank instead. As a result, in the past 2 years, there was a drought, and the output decreased. Then last year, many small insects were born, and the grain output was even more unsightly. Except for that field, There are only scattered fields in other places, and there is not enough to live on, let alone collect taxes. Other than that, they are all pastoralists. Herdsmen's tax revenue is not low. Last year's snowstorm and the epidemic, the medicinal materials that the imperial court gave to the disaster-stricken areas did not reach Liangzhou at all. Therefore, Liangzhou had to be responsible for the treatment of smallpox patients. The prescription was delivered from the capital, but money was needed to buy medicine, and money was needed for the food and drink of the patient, including the food and drink of his family. Otherwise, they did not die of smallpox, but died of starvation and bitter cold, which was also a major fault in his political achievements. So Duan Shishi did an inventory a year ago and found that he had no money. It's okay to have no money. At that time, he was in a hurry. He temporarily misappropriated the taxes and donations that were to be handed over to the imperial court. Anyway, such things are often done in their far-flung state capitals, and they usually don't matter. Dajin has a vast territory, and the areas north and west of Xiaosu are basically unable to collect taxes, and even self-sufficiency cannot be achieved. Just do it. Inspector Duan has done this a lot, and he did succeed this time. Shortly after the beginning of the spring, a prophecy came true. It was indeed snowing again in the north, and it was quite heavy. Liangzhou suffered huge losses. Lambs froze to death, and even whole sheep froze to death. Coupled with the loss of smallpox disease, Liangzhou did not recover at all. Therefore, Duan Shi's history book pleaded guilty and cried for poverty, which means that the tax and donations that were prepared to be transported to Beijing were gone. In order to fight the snow disaster and smallpox, he had to misappropriate it, but it was not enough now, so he asked for state support. Then the Ministry of Household came to the document to express his understanding for his misappropriation of taxes. He knew that this year was special, but he would have to make up for it in the future. By the way, Liangzhou has had a record of not paying taxes for 3 years in the past 8 years. This year is the 4th time. I hope they will make up for it in one go in the future. The Ministry of Households rejected Liangzhou's request for help, and said that the Ministry of Households is also very difficult now, and the National Treasury has paid a lot to fight the epidemic. Can you stick to it yourself, open source and reduce expenditure? No money anyway. Inspector Duan sighed and said, that's why I recalled all the people in the post station. I really ran out of money. Besides the post station, I also reduced the number of people at some gates. The post station continued to open, not only the courier and the staff needed to eat and drink, but also charcoal and other horses to feed. It's okay if the people passing by are merchants or private individuals, they can barely make some money, and they can subsidize some expenses if they can't get back their capital. If officials like Zhou Man live in, they will not only receive no money, but also have to be responsible for their food and drink, and the food and grass for the livestock. Wait. The cost is huge. So Duan inspector simply recalled all the people and closed the inn. However, he was still poor, so he urgently needed the help of the emperor and the prince. He looked at Bai Shan with bright eyes. Bai Shan, he just asked curiously. After all, he could have lived in the inn every day. Even if there was no hot water for bathing, he would at least have to eat hot meals. Money matters, the emperor cannot decide alone, and the Ministry of Household should be right, other places need subsidies more than Liangzhou. So his eyes swept to Lu Huan. Lu Huan immediately lowered his head as if he didn't know anything. Bai Shan can only say that if there is a chance, he will reunite with the prince. Inspector Duan breathed a sigh of relief, but Bai Shan couldn't help but ask, is there no native products in Liangzhou that can do business with the outside world? I remember that there are iron mines in Liangzhou. Inspector Duan said with a complicated expression, the iron ore in Liangzhou was sold as early as the Dade period. That was the time of the late emperor. Bai Shan expressed his understanding. During that time, it was very chaotic. Today Liangzhou belongs to the great Jin dynasty, tomorrow it may belong to the Turks, and the day after tomorrow, it may be occupied by Tubo. Dajin must have been short of money after the occupation, so he simply sold the iron ore under his jurisdiction to the local clan. Dajin may not be able to defend Liangzhou, but the local big family should be able to defend their iron ore, and it's nothing if they can't. Anyway, Dajin took the money, and he would not be the one who lost. Who knew that His Majesty gradually stabilized the situation after ascending the throne? Not only did he snatch back Liangzhou, but he also snatched back the territory that belonged to other vassal states. Take the iron ore back, right? The place also needs to be safe for a long time. Bai Shan didn't dare to give him any blind ideas, so he could only say, maybe I can ask them to donate some money. Anyway, let's talk about it after this year. Inspector Duan did not intend to lower his face to beg those people for the time being. He would wait for the court's assistance first, and then talk about it when he didn't. Man Bao has already seen Mrs. Duan's illness. She has rheumatism, so her legs and feet are uncomfortable when the weather is cold and it rains. There is no good way to do this. Foot soaks and oral prescriptions. She said, I don't know if there are doctors in Liangzhou city who can know acupuncture. If there is, I will leave a set of acupuncture methods. He can tie the old lady once every 10 days. The effect is much better. The old lady feels a lot better now, her legs are a little warm, not as uncomfortable as before. She heard the words and said immediately, it's naturally best if the Dr. Joe is willing to keep the prescription, we will go to the doctor later. This acupuncture method is mainly for lower limbs. The old lady is getting older, so even a male doctor can try it. It's just that the back is not easy to tie. The old lady twisted and asked, is there any needle method that does not tie the back? After thinking about it, Man Bao said, I can simplify it, but the effect is not as good as the set of needles. The old lady sighed regretfully, but she still accepted it. She could accept lifting up her trouser legs, but it was not acceptable to lift her clothes in front of the male doctor. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2173. When an inspector sent the person out, he asked, when does Master Joe plan to leave? We will see him off at that time. Man Bao smiled and said, we will leave early the day after tomorrow. Inspector Duan didn't expect it to be so fast, so he froze for a moment and then said, then I will hold a banquet in the guest house tomorrow, please don't drive Chief Shizo to accompany Mr. Joe to see him off. Man Bao declined. Tomorrow they have to prepare their luggage and buy some more things, and they will also eat and drink when they see off. They have no shortage of money for a meal, and they are not familiar with each other, so there is no need to eat this meal. Joe Man refused very firmly, and today they communicated smoothly. Duan Inspector knew that it was not that she did not give him face, but that she had no intention of doing these entertainments. After thinking about it, she did not force it, and smiled and sent people away. But the next day, he sent 2 baskets of non-cakes to the inn, as well as 2 marinated lamb legs. Manbao and the others don't care much about the leg of lamb. On the grassland, they really don't lack sheep to eat. Even if they can't meet the herdsmen for a long time, they can still hunt wild sheep. With Keek there, they can always find sheep. But I really like the non-cakes scent, and there are a lot of 2 baskets, not the kind of small bamboo baskets that are placed on the dining table, but the large bamboo baskets that can be carried on the back. A sheet of white linen was placed inside, and the prepared non-cakes were layered in a bamboo basket. When the linen was closed, the heat could not be released temporarily, and it was still hot when it was delivered to the inn. Man Bao couldn't help but grab a taste that was sprinkled with black sesame seeds. A piece of naan is the size of her head, and one is enough for her to eat twice. Obviously, Duan governor is very sincere. So Man Bao also sincerely wrote 2 more recipes and handed them over to the servants. These are 2 recipes for medicinal wine, Liangzhou bitter cold. These 2 medicinal wine recipes can disperse cold, but be careful, medicinal herbs, if you need to concoct it, you have to buy it from a drugstore. You can't concoct it yourself, or it will be poisonous if you don't make it well. The servant wrote down the words, then took the recipe and ran back to the master. Inspector Duan received an additional recipe for this medicinal wine, and after reading it for a long time, he said to Duan Cheng, "This Lord Zhou is a wonderful person." Duan Cheng didn't know what was wrong. Duan Inspector touched his beard and smiled, "Tomorrow you will take another day off from the school, and I will take you to see them in person." Seeing that his son still didn't understand, Duan Inspector ordered 2 recipes and said, "Such recipes can be handed down to the family. If ordinary people have such recipes in their families, they will not have to worry about their livelihood. Take out the cake." It can be seen that this is not an exchange of equal value, but love for love. Since the other party has love, he will naturally be righteous. Duan Inspector said, "Tomorrow I will let someone escort them out of Liangzhou." Bai Shan didn't expect Man Bao to give Fang Ziyi directly, so he couldn't help asking, "Why are you so generous?" The prescriptions in the hands of the doctors are also very particular. Generally, the prescriptions for medicine and soup can be given to the doctor. In some remote places, the doctors value their own prescriptions. Except for the wealthy people who must leave the prescriptions to see the situation, when people go to see a doctor, they do not give prescriptions. They directly write words that only the pharmacist can understand and ask the pharmacist to prescribe the medicine. In big places like Yazhu City and Beijing City, firstly, they don't mind the outflow of these ordinary prescriptions, and secondly, in order to avoid unnecessary disputes, they will take away the prescriptions for patients. But there is a class of prescriptions that even the imperial physicians in the palace would not give to people easily. It is this kind of finished prescription. Finished recipes such as ointments, pills, and medicinal wines can be produced and sold in large quantities, so most of them are held in the hands of individuals as secret recipes and will not leak out. There are many prescriptions for ointments and pills in the Taiyuan Hospital, which are also placed in the reference room of the Taiyuan Hospital, and can only be viewed if they reach a certain level. Not to mention outsiders like Bai Shan, the medical assistants and the little imperial physicians in this hospital, etc., can't even see them if they want to. Man Bao waved his hand indifferently and said, "I saw it yesterday, not only Mrs. Duan, but Governor Duan also has rheumatism. I went to the pharmacy with Lyra the day before yesterday to buy medicine. Some of the patients who sought medical treatment said that most of them had rheumatism, so I was hesitant to give them the recipe, but now it's not a loss to give them a favor." Bai Shan asked, "Is this medicinal wine good for removing dampness?" "The main thing is to get rid of the cold," Man Bao said. "It's too cold here. In winter and spring, the cold hits. At this time, drinking a little medicinal wine can resist the cold." Bai Shan stretched out his hand and said, "Give me one." Man Bao went to study ink to write for him, and asked curiously, "What do you want this for? Since you want to benefit the people of Liangzhou, why do you only give it to the governor's house?" Man Bao paused for a moment and said to him, "You want to spread it out? This won't work." Although she said this, she still wrote down the prescription, and she said, "There are 2 kinds of poisons in the medicines used in this prescription, and special processing methods are needed to remove the poisons. It is difficult for ordinary people to make them well, so I don't the rumors. Ordinary people get the prescription, and it is very likely that they will go out and dig up the herbal medicine and wash it and soak it in it. Doing so is tantamount to suicide." She gave it to the prefect's mansion because the prefect's mansion had the ability to make the correct medicinal liquor, and could also pass the recipe on to someone who could make the correct medicinal liquor. She said, "This thing can only be circulated in a small area." "Who said that?" Bai Shan said, "The pharmacy can always make the correct medicinal wine, right?" He said, "I'll sell the recipe to the medicine shop in a while, and let them sell the finished wine, right?" "Man Bao, you think too much." "Bai Shan, could it be that this recipe is made public by your doctor, but also in the hands of other pharmacies?" "That's not true. I found this recipe from the Taiyuan hospital. There are similar ones out there, but not exactly the same," he added. "This recipe is more gentle." "That's fine, just wait for the money." Man Bao hesitated, but seeing Bai Shan's excitement, he didn't stop him at all, and went to the pharmacy with him, but she didn't go in, but let him and Daji go, while she sat at a booth outside and called a bowl of noodles was eaten while waiting. Not long after, Bai Shan smiled and Daji came out, said goodbye to the shopkeeper who sent them out, and went straight to Man Bao. Man Bao hadn't finished his bowl of noodles, so he looked up at him, "Come out so soon?" Bai Shan sat opposite her and asked Daji, "Does Daji eat noodles?" Daji refused. He didn't understand why the masters could eat so much. Not long ago, they went shopping and finished their lunch, and when they returned to the inn, a few of them shared a naan cake. How long did it take to eat noodles again? Man Bao seemed to see Daji's question and said to him, "We are growing up. Do you think we have grown taller recently?" Bai Shan's attention was instantly diverted. "Have we grown taller?" Man Bao nodded affirmatively. "Yes, I have grown taller." It was only then that Daji noticed that young Master and Miss Man seemed to have grown a little taller, even young Master Tang. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2174. These people are not as good as the crown, so they are still growing. Lu Huan should have grown enough, but whether it is the eldest Yin or the youngest Man Bao, this period of time is a little longer. Man Bao said while eating the noodles, "I've summed it up. One is because we are still young and we are all growing up, especially the three of us. Yin is not very sick before, but now he is in better health, also began to grow. The second is because we have been eating a lot of meat recently. When they go out, they rarely find people to buy vegetables on the grassland, except for wild vegetables, so they mostly eat meat. Sometimes, for better digestion, they drink broth, that is, they can eat wild vegetables boiled in broth, and the guards don't even eat wild vegetables. The third is because we are moving and basking in the sun every day." "Bai Shan, what does this have to do with sunbathing?" "Of course it has something to do with it. Flowers and plants need to be in the sun to grow taller, and so do people." "Bai Shan, we are the same as flowers and plants." Man Bao nodded. "The growth of all things in the world is inseparable from light, it's just that there is more light and less light, and it's just light and dark." Bai Shan thought about it. Man Bao asked, "Have you sold the prescription?" Bai Shan gave her a deep look, then took out a purse from his sleeve pocket and gave it to her. "Sold it?" Man Bao widened his eyes in surprise, and immediately opened the purse and poured it down. There were 3 silver ingots, 2 two-taels and 1 one-tael. Man Bao was stunned. "You really sold it?" Bai Shan just stared at her, surprised. Man Bao felt guilty, and said embarrassedly, "I think you are too confident, so I think you should give it a try." "Then why don't you go in with me?" "At first, I was wondering if it was because she came to the pharmacy to buy a lot of medicinal materials the day before yesterday, and it was difficult to go in and sell the goods. Who knows?" When he entered the door and asked about medicinal liquor, the shopkeeper hinted that their pharmacy did not do medicinal liquor business. He originally thought that it was because they didn't have a recipe. Fortunately, his intuition was wrong at the time, so he asked 2 more. "Man Bayadao, medicinal wine is also wine, it's fine to make it at home, but the sale of medicinal wine in pharmacies has to be reported to the yamen, so that's fine. It takes a certain amount of time to brew medicinal wine, and the selection of medicinal materials is also very strict. We do it. Most of the doctors make it for their own use, or send some to relatives and friends, and patients in need can also use it in the pharmacy, but it is difficult to buy it back for use. Firstly, the quality of medicinal wine is not well controlled, even in the same batch of medicinal wine, because there are some differences between the medicinal materials. The medicinal effects are also different. The second is because the medicinal materials are poisonous, and if they are not processed properly, they will produce toxins, which are harmful to the doctor and the doctor. For a pharmacy, if you can't guarantee the safety of the things you sell, you can't leave the pharmacy. Because Bai Shan is his own person, Man Bao said bluntly, who knows if the sold medicinal wine will be added with anything else? That's really unreasonable. And if there is a problem with the prescribed decoction and ointment, you can find the problem. The former can check the dregs, and the quality of the latter batch is the same, and the ointment cannot be used up at one time, and someone can add something to it. Find out. Medicinal wine is different. They are all medicinal materials made from aconitum. After the customer buys it, if they add another unprocessed aconitum into it, soak it for a period of time and take it out. Good medicinal wine turns into poisonous medicinal wine. Makes sense? Therefore, things like medicinal wine can only be used by patients in pharmacies at present, and pharmacies will not sell them outside under normal circumstances. There are exceptions, Man Bao said. For example, when I go to see a doctor for someone I trust, and realize that the medicinal wine is more useful, I will prescribe it for them, and then make it myself and sell it to them. Bai Shan asked, but the drugstore's hand? Depending on the situation, if I go to the doctor, I will naturally be in the hands of Ji Shitang, but if the shopkeeper Zheng goes to the doctor, I should know the hands of the pharmacy, which is not necessarily the case, she said. There are too many variables in medicine and wine. Pharmacies generally do not compete with doctors for this benefit. That's why she was surprised that Bai Shan was able to sell it, and he sold it for 5 taels. Man Bao couldn't help but touched the silver ingot again, grinning happily, it's all mine. Just as Bai Shan's face came up, he took a silver ingot of 2 taels from her and put it in his purse, 6 or 4 cents, you 6 and I 4. Man Bao had no opinion, mainly because she never thought that the pharmacy would really buy this recipe, and this recipe was copied from the hospital. Man Bao was very curious, how did you sell it? Bai Shan said lightly, it's nothing, I just regretted that they didn't have medicinal wine here. I said that our group is going to the western regions, and we may need to come back after winter. We didn't expect the north to be so bitter and cold, so we wanted to buy some medicinal wine. To keep out the cold, since there is no medicinal wine in the pharmacy, I don't know if there are spicier wines for sale, so we will buy medicinal herbs and make them by ourselves. Man Bao became interested and immediately asked, and then what? Then we chatted. Bai Shan glanced at her and said, Liangzhou is not very big, because of the smallpox in Ziyazhu. There are not many people coming to Liangzhou from the south and east recently. Our group is very conspicuous, not to mention in the past 2 days, I was buying things again, and I was visiting the Great Wall and the governor's mansion, and the shopkeeper of the pharmacy knew about me. Bai Shan remembered something and smiled slightly, of course I know you too. Man Bao was stunned for a moment, and he said, knowing that this recipe came from your hands, he bought it with 5 taels of silver and promised to make 2 jars of medicinal wine for us for free. Now we will start preparing the medicinal materials and drinks, and we should be able to get it before dark. Take it to the station. Man Bao blinked, am I so famous? Bai Shan said, I heard that after we left yesterday, the prefect's mansion invited a doctor to come to the mansion to see prescriptions and ask about acupuncture, and their doctor also went. So when Joe Man and the others went to the pharmacy to buy herbs the day before yesterday, they probably didn't know who she was, but they should have known after yesterday. Man Bao pondered for a while, and became complacent, so I'm so good. Bai Shan nodded, it's very famous. The two bury their heads in the noodles and discuss, I have seen that there are 2 pharmacies in Liangzhou, should we go to the other one? Bai Shan didn't have any objections, and the 5 taels of silver was a lot, enough for them to buy a lot of things. Daji said, Master, it's getting late, we should go back and prepare our luggage. Bai Shan and Man Bao can only express regret. The two of them ate a bowl of noodles and went back. Bai Erlang and the others were packing their bags. When they saw the two, they said, Sir, let us pack our luggage again, so that it will be easier to retrieve things later. I bought a lot of things this morning. You have to sort it out too. Hey, why do you have the smell of sheep soup? The noodles they ate just now were cooked with sheep soup. The two of Man Bao were surprised. We walked back, and the wind was blowing all the way, so you can still smell it. See you tomorrow.